Keir Starmer has launched his 4th mission for government because he can't do anything policy announcement that's not a mission or a promise or something. Labour's Green Prosperity Plan, which will cut bills, create jobs and provide energy security. So it's going to end all new, that's the keyword, new North Sea oil and gas exploration if it wins the next general election, overturn the ban on new onshore wind and create Great British Energy, a new publicly owned clean energy company, which they want to host in Scotland. Thoughts?
I think there's a couple of interesting aspects to it. Most of all, for me, I think having didn't he call it Scotland can be the beating heart of Britain with GB Energy. Just purely on a geographical basis, I thought that was quite funny because I was like, maybe it's the throbbing brain of Britain rather than the beating heart.
It's not the central.
Yeah.
Well, Scotland's so big that, like, I don't know, maybe...
Yeah, like the entire...
That's probably Scotland.
Top half, yeah.
This is like Inverness. This is like...
The mind and soul of Britain. I think it's quite an interesting electoral strategy when you're taking just Scotland into account. The 3E were talking last week about, he touched on it a little bit, of the SNP's woes recently, how that's kind of tarnishing their reputation. Is it tarnishing their electoral heft? Is something that you can't tell until a year from now, but it's indicated by some polling that Labour are going to be the majority party in Scotland at the next general election. You add into the mix, but like this kind of polling has come out before the announcement today of GB Energy being stationed up in Scotland, yada, yada, yada. I think it's kind of a counter-separatist point from Labour to be like, I mean, you can remain ambiguous about Scotland, but I want to talk about...
I was laughing at the word separatist.
Right. No, I mean, like, the nationalist kind of...
No. I know exactly what you meant, but I think separatist just reminds me of Star Wars when people say it.
I think it's also quite lame to be describing the SNP as separatists. I think they just don't have the edge.
Is it Tom Harwood always talks about separatists? Separatism.
Yeah.
Because it's a choice of words to be like, as if independence, it's like you're being willfully disrupting. It's more evocative.
I acknowledge that it was probably a poor choice of words, not least from a man who is a 32 county Republican. But
you have your own issues with separatism.
Yeah, I rolled my own eyes when I said it.
Yeah.
But no, I think it's an interesting way to kind of take the fight to the SNP to be like, right, you've been your entire point up until now has been Westminster doesn't offer us anything, Westminster takes, doesn't give, blah blah blah. Labour are now coming with a strategy to say, well, here we are giving. Here we are reindustrializing. Here we are reskilling, providing new technologies, new industries to the people of Scotland. It'd be interesting to see in the next couple of weeks to see how the SNP can spin it in a way of like, well, actually, we've always wanted to do this, but we've never had the authority.
I think Hamza Yusuf commented on it, and he said, how can you trust Labour about green energy if they've already U-turned on their... Was it 85 billion? No, was
28.
85 billion would be even better.
It would be understandable that they U-turned on that, but 28.
I think also as well, it's important to acknowledge that green energy is good, and I think there is a real need to pivot away from fossil fuels. There's a finite amount of them. If you can pivot to green energy.
Yeah.
I also think it's quite funny when people object to onshore wind farms, saying they like, but for like...
What about my sheep?
Sheep, I actually kind of get. But people are like, for reasons of natural beauty. As if we've not had wind farms in this country for decades now.
I find that a very interesting argument because whenever I'm on a train and I see a wind farm out my window, not that I think it's beautiful. I think I'm not sat there...
I hope not.
Finally.
I hope we don't do that in public at all.
I've waited an hour for this. But I don't know. It's kind of, it's a really nice
they're not
image,
right?
They're not ugly,
no,
but it's also nice to reflect on a wind farm. You see it there and you're like, we are doing something to change the world, or to change how we consume energy, create energy, whatever it might be. I think it's actually quite a meditative scene to have a wind farm. Like when I'm walking through a new build housing estate and I see my solar panels on the roofs, I can't help but think of the possibilities in the future.
You're able to go tour of Britain of infrastructure and just like write poems about it. I don't. It's interesting that you want to shag the windmills like that. You know, but I kind of know what you mean up until the waxing lyrical.
I mean, they're not an eyesore was what that tangent is going on.
You don't mind seeing, you're embellishing that.
I'm fine with windmills.
You're fine with, I think just like, it's just, they are ruining, they are loud and they are ugly. And I don't think.
I mean, it's also the question of like, how close do you need to be stood to a wind turbine to acknowledge that it's loud?
So loud. Right,
just close enough to get your arm chopped off by one of the turbines. Yeah,
and it's also, you know, it's a good thing. So if I don't know if a field is less nice, but the world doesn't end, I'd much rather that field continued.
Yeah, I mean there are not a lot of arguments to be made against it, but the ones that are there have a lot of backing, don't they? Like, you see it in the States, you see it here to some extent with people like Reform. Is it Reform or Reclaim? Richard Tice. It's Reform, isn't it?
Yes, and I think Lawrence Fox is Reclaim. I think.
So Tice, the thing I find most interesting about him is that he willfully ignores renewables as a viable option. Or no, he doesn't ignore them. He says, fine, we can have renewables, but they're not going to replace oil and gas. So what we should do, rather than building up to the point where they will replace oil and gas, is frack.
Yeah. That ruins it more.
Yeah.
That ruins the
But what about your scenery?
Yeah.
What about
you're
your
obsessed
water
with
basin? You know?
Yeah.
Like, there's the alternatives to what is being proposed in green agendas across the globe is not a viable future opportunity, right? You can turn around and say, yeah, we're going to phase it out. We're going to get to net zero. But in the meantime, we're going to
go ham.
We're going to go absolutely nuts for the next 50 years. Doesn't make sense, because you're going to get to the point, and like, it was something that was in the conversation this morning about GB Energy, was that Keir was kind of nabbed a couple of times by journalists who were saying, okay, so you mentioned it briefly there a second ago, of you're not going to give any new oil and gas contracts, but what about the ones that are yet to be, that have been approved and are yet to like break ground on? And it's just, oh, well, you know, they're done, you know, so they're going to continue on. Lesser of two evils, sure, but should we be divesting completely? Probably. It shouldn't be a case of we're going to have, well, we're not even going to have 28 billion, you know, we're going to eventually have 28 billion.
Do you know, I actually think that might actually just be good politics from Starmer, because if he was to commit to divesting away entirely from oil and gas, there's thousands of people in Scotland especially, who work in the oil and gas industry. And you're not going to vote for a man who says he's going to destroy your
take your job. Yeah,
I think that's might be in it. Like, even if he wants to do that, which would be ambitious.
But can they not work on the current oil and gas fields for the next 50 years? Like,
yeah, no, but
the North Sea oil and gas field has a lot.
But I don't know. But also, you would like to think your job is going to last longer. That it wouldn't have an end point. Is what I'm trying to say.
Yeah.
You're like, you're not going to win votes by saying you're going to, even though you're creating jobs. They're like, if you don't want to lose your job. I think it's to not alienate those voters potentially.
Sure. And I guess that's, even if you were to say, turn around and say, we're going to reskill you, rather than having you working on these new oil and gas fields, we're going to reskill you to be a hydroelectric technician or a wind power specialist or whatever it might be. You're not going to be getting paid like the popular trades, you're not going to be getting paid the same as an average labourer working on an oil field off the coast of Scotland, right? There's just no way that you're going to be getting that. Sure, there's engineering jobs in renewables that are getting quite highly paid work, but by the time you scale that up, it's going to level out, and people are not going to be getting paid extortionate amounts of money that they are getting paid to risk their lives on oil rigs in the middle of nowhere. You're going to be getting paid a respectable wage, and respectable to all of us is good, but to the people that are getting paid obscene amounts of money now, are not going to be very happy with that, right?
But then I don't know, they might like not risking their lives.
Yeah, but I mean, if I've risked my life so far and I'm like dead,
it's like is it the deep sea welders? They get paid so much money because of how dangerous their job is.
Like the guys that change light bulbs on those, like, what are they? Like in America, the electricity pylon things, they change a light bulb on them twice a year and get paid something like 70 grand to do it.
They might be happier with an office job, we don't know. Has anyone asked them?
Have you considered being admin for GD Energy?